Hello and welcome to the Spiritually Incorrect Podcast with me, your host, Shiv Gupta. I'm the author of the Advaitaholics Anonymous books, Sobering Insights for Spiritual Addicts, and a Manifesto for Spiritual Anarchy. Recently, just about a week ago, the third volume of the Advaitaholics Anonymous series was published, and it's titled An Antidote to Spiritual Enlightenment. And for my viewers today, I wanted to read a chapter of the book, just as an introduction to, what the book is about and what it's like. So I'm going to read a chapter titled Right View. Spirituality is not about self-improvement. Self-improvement is an agenda that spiritual culture promotes, whether overtly or subliminally. Self-improvement is an inner bias that we are manipulated into adopting, and which manipulates us into skewing our perspectives on self and reality. The skew is typically towards all that is noble, good, compassionate, wise, and balanced within us, and simultaneously away from all that is ugly, base, cruel, ignorant, and unbalanced within us. Although in some occult practices, the opposite is true. And once this skew has been established, life becomes an endlessly sloping surface, whereby the gravitational force of our own biases propels our perceptions, our thoughts, our actions, and our intentions in the direction of seeking to better ourselves and our circumstances based on some culturally sanctioned standard of what that betterment should look like. On a recent comment thread, someone quoted Shunryu Suzuki as saying, "You're perfect just as you are, and you could use a little improvement." My question is, who decides what that little improvement looks like? By what standard is such an improvement made? It is always the prevailing culture that sets the standard on what constitutes self-improvement. Yet the reality is that improvement, for lack of a better term, isn't something we need to contrive. Growth and evolution are hardwired into our DNA. In other words, we have no choice but to grow, evolve, improve, or whatever other word you want to use to describe it. Every being on this planet evolves and adapts in response to its environment and social milieu. In other words, such improvement is constantly happening. It is an unavoidable aspect of our manifestations as sentient beings. So the way I see it, improvement is not the issue here, nor need it be the focus. This is neither about personal growth nor spiritual evolution. You can no more prevent or accelerate your spiritual growth than you can speed up or prevent your bones from growing. Yet the entire premise upon which spiritual culture is built is that you can. You can grow intentionally. You can evolve at an accelerated pace. You can improve as a spiritual being by purifying your mind and healing your suffering. This is the promise being sold to you, whether overtly or subtly. Make no mistake, even teachings that promote acceptance or accepting yourself as you are ultimately about showing acceptance to achieve some desired result. Spiritual culture is about molding individuals into the image that it projects as a human ideal. You are conditioned into developing an inward skew in your own perceptions of self and, by extension, of other selves around you. And this behavior, when mimicked by everyone in the culture, only serves to reinforce that skew. Such a culture further concretizes when this monkey see, monkey do behavior becomes a runaway phenomenon. In Japan, where I lived for nearly a decade, there is an obsession with manipulating the natural world, especially plants and trees, to produce aesthetically pleasing yet unnatural forms. By a process of stunting, pruning, twisting, and tying down, these manifestations of nature are turned into works of art that people gather to admire. Spiritual culture has a similar effect on an individual. By promoting an aesthetic of what a spiritually advanced person should look like, it stunts, prunes, twists, and ties down those aspects of ourselves that do not comply with its ideal. And while the finished product may be a person that millions of people gather to admire, such a person is, spiritually speaking, most unfree. They are bound by a web of social expectations from which he or she cannot emerge. Such spiritual teachers, who are products of such a culture, are some of the most unfree people you will meet. They are caged by their self-imposed ideals of liberation. They are stuck in their image of transcendence. They are blinded by their understanding of what enlightenment is. They have been molded by the culture to exhibit similar behaviors, similar attitudes, similar lingo, similar body language, similar values. And while that outward form may appear wise, charismatic, and equanimous, it is only a shell that you see. Deep inside is a spirit hopelessly trapped. Just as you can prune an oak to look like a pine, just as you can tie down a Japanese maple to resemble a shrub, so too can you psychologically manipulate a human being into appearing like a Buddha. But what makes the Buddha is that he is the original Buddha. And what makes Bob Bob is that he is an original Bob. For Bob to try and become a Buddha is as stupid as the Buddha trying to be Bob. Spiritual culture has us forever striving to emulate an idealized self that is incongruent with who we are in our entirety. It prunes those parts of us that are abrasive. It twists those areas that are painful. It ties down those motivations that cause us to suffer. It stunts those difficult and problematic aspects of the self that crave self-expression. And the resulting form may please those who perceive it, but the essence of the being itself is lost. Spirituality has nothing to do with molding yourself into some impossible ideal created for you by culture. It has to do with being yourself. And being yourself is not just some trite catchphrase or corporate slogan. It is really the crux of what life is about. Are you free to be? That is all that matters here. And such freedom eludes an individual as long as they remain tethered to an expectation or an ideal. That is why spirituality is a fiercely personal affair. It has absolutely everything to do with your own experience and absolutely nothing to do with what anyone else, including the culture, thinks about it. Who are you in your best moments and your worst? Who are you when you are compassionate and when you're cruel? Who are you when you are profound and when you are petty? Who are you when you are virtuous and when you are violent? Who are you when you are calm and when you are chaotic? All of the above constitutes your spirituality. The culture around you is a caricature, a paint-by-numbers farce, parading as real art, a parody that has some entertainment value but no spiritual merit whatsoever. Culture can mold you, but it cannot grow you. Culture can modify you, but it cannot improve you. Culture can condition you, but it cannot free you. One reader, a Buddhist, was talking to me recently about Buddha's Eightfold Path and asked me what I thought of it. I told him, to me, it was just common sense. It resembled a workflow diagram, a logical and cascading causal sequence, something like a line of dominoes. He asked me what I meant by that. This, by the way, is an individual who has been on the spiritual path for years and has devoted himself to an ascetic lifestyle of humble means and stringent practice. I explained that the only thing an individual ever need concern themselves with is that very first domino, right view. Right view is a pointer to developing clarity of perception, which is the only real choice a human being has. From that first domino, the others all naturally fall, over time and in an entirely organic manner. The word right, the way I see it in this context, by the way, doesn't mean correct, as if set to some universal standard. Rather, it means uniquely appropriate to the individual. Okay, so right for you. The roots of right thought emerge from the seed of right view. The sprout of right speech forms from the roots of right thought. The trunk of right action forms from the sprout of right speech. The branches of right work emerge from the trunk of right action. The leaves of right effort spring from the branches of right work. The flowers of right mindfulness blossom among the leaves of right effort. And eventually, the fruit of right absorption appears from the flowers of right mindfulness. What the Buddha was describing is abundantly evident in nature, a purely organic process requiring not an ounce of intervention to facilitate it. Contrary to what most people believe, that final step of right absorption, samadhi, as some people call it, is not some moment of mystical union when a person finally becomes another Buddha, as if one Buddha were not enough. It's that moment when you finally become so entirely yourself that you're no longer even aware of or concerned with yourself. When every ounce of awareness is so busy, focused on living, that you haven't an iota of energy left to spend on self-management. Total mindlessness. And it all begins with the first domino, the only one you have any choice over, your perception. Yet spiritual culture has you focused on trying to affect every other domino, except the first. It has you meddling with your thoughts, trying to purify your speech, trying to elevate your actions, trying to beautify your efforts, trying to contrive your mindfulness, and trying to catalyze your samadhi. In short, self-improvement. Self-improvement doesn't work. As long as that first domino is still standing, so will all the others. Culture cannot grow a tree. It can stunt, prune, twist, and tie down the tree into any shape it likes. But a tree grows simply by virtue of it being itself. Until you are clear on who you are, and I'm not talking about knowledge, but perception, you can jump through every spiritual hoop that has been set up for you by your prevailing spiritual culture. The best you can ever hope to become is a really compelling circus act. Spiritual teachings, rituals, communities, and practices are distractions designed to draw your awareness towards the culture and away from being rooted in your own experience. Yet, it's only when the seed of your perception takes root in the soil of your own experience that spiritual growth spontaneously occurs. You come into your own rather than contorting into a cultural ideal. You blossom into yourself instead of bending into the form of a Buddha.